My stepson wants me to pay for him to be a father and insults me when I refuse. But now that my husband has taken his side, they can all find a place to live together when I kick them out of my house. I'm going to tell you about the worst argument I've ever had in my life, and I hope that you, strangers from the internet, can give me an objective perspective. Honestly, I don't know if I did the right thing, or if I've become the villain in this story. Here it goes. I'm 39 years old and married to my 44-year-old husband. We met about 6 years ago and have been married for 5. He has 2 children from his previous marriage. A 24-year-old daughter, with whom I get along very well, and a 19-year-old son, with whom the relationship has been more complicated. With his daughter, there have never been any problems. She's a well-grounded young woman who finished university, has her life organized, and although she doesn't live nearby, when she comes to visit us, we always have a good time. We go out to dinner, make plans, chat. In short, we have a good relationship. I never tried to be her mother, but I always aimed for a cordial relationship, and now we have a relationship that I would describe as friendship with my stepdaughter. I also have a good relationship with the mother of my stepchildren, which I wouldn't call a friendship, but it's good enough for us all to live in harmony, so to speak. The problem is with my stepson. Let's call him Jason. Since I met him, he's always been a bit difficult. He barely finished high school, and instead of continuing his studies or learning a trade, he decided to get a job. And that's fine, not everyone has to go to college, but sometimes it seems like he doesn't put much effort into what he does either. His attitude is usually somewhat careless, especially when it comes to taking on responsibilities. A while ago, he showed up in the middle of the night, saying he had just decided to visit us out of the blue, so we let him stay since he doesn't live in the same city. However, the next day, he asked his father for $5,000 to repair a car he had bought. A car that, to be honest, was a model he clearly couldn't afford to maintain. Did he really think an expensive car, even if it was used, wouldn't have costly repairs? The problem was that something important broke and there was Jason asking for money to fix it. As always, my husband gave it to him. But here's the current issue. 2 months ago, Jason visited us again, and this time he brought his girlfriend whom we barely knew. She was a girl he had only been dating for 5 months. And as expected, they were here to ask us for something. After a few formalities to make it seem like they weren't just there to ask for something, although deep down, that's exactly what they were doing, Jason dropped the bomb. They were expecting a baby. My husband immediately got excited and congratulated them with a big smile. Of course, I congratulated them too, although I couldn't help but feel a slight concern, because I knew where this was going. And sure enough, after a few minutes of conversation came the question, "Can we move in with you?" It turns out they live in a small apartment that's barely enough for the 2 of them, and they don't have the space or the means to raise a baby there. Jason is working, but he doesn't earn much, and his girlfriend isn't working because she wants to stay home during the pregnancy and then be a stay-at-home mom. That already gave me a bad feeling, but I kept my composure. This is where things started to get uncomfortable. My husband, without consulting me privately first or at least looking at me to see what I thought, told them yes, of course they could move in with us for as long as they needed. There was just one problem. The house is mine. I bought it long before we got married. My husband was renting when we met, as he had gone through a divorce and had also saved up to send his kids to college. While we've shared everything as a couple, the house has always been in my name. He helped his daughter with college by paying part of her tuition, while the money intended for his son's education was used for him to start his life after high school. That didn't last long though, because as I've hinted, my stepson is not the best at managing money. Before I said anything, I asked if the pregnancy had been planned, as it seemed like a reasonable question considering the situation. Jason, with a smile as if it were a joke or something funny, replied that it had just happened, but that they wanted to be parents. The reason we got to this point was that his girlfriend had switched birth control pills for medical reasons, and in the meantime they didn't use any other form of protection because, in Jason's exact words, he doesn't like using condoms. My husband and the girlfriend laughed as if it were the funniest thing in the world, but I didn't find it amusing at all. How did they expect us to take responsibility for their irresponsibility? This wasn't an accident. It was the consequence of not being responsible. I told them I needed to think about it before giving them an answer. At that moment, they all looked at me as if I had said something terrible, as if I had killed a puppy or eaten their favorite slice of pizza. My husband gave me a look as if I had ruined the party, and both Jason and his girlfriend seemed upset that I didn't immediately say yes. That night, when we were alone, I talked to my husband about what had happened. I told him I understood that he wanted to help his son, but that making such an important decision without even consulting me wasn't right. This was my house, and although I consider it ours because we are married, a decision of that magnitude required a prior conversation. His response left me frozen. He basically told me that it was his son and future grandchild, and that he would do whatever was necessary to help them. He accused me of being selfish for not understanding what they were going through. To which I responded that, of course, I understood, but that all of this could have been avoided with a little responsibility. They didn't need to be in this situation in the first place if they had just used protection during the pill change. It felt like I was saying something crazy, as if being responsible at their age, when they weren't planning or able to be parents, was an outlandish idea. Even now, as I write this with a clear head, it seems even more absurd, but to my husband at that moment it seemed like the most normal thing in the world. That night, we went to bed without speaking any further. The next morning when I came down for breakfast, they were all sitting in the living room, as if waiting to talk to me. I hadn't had my coffee yet, so I wasn't in the mood for what was coming. Jason's girlfriend, with a forced smile, started talking to me about how, if they couldn't move in, at least I should help them get a bigger apartment. My husband quickly jumped in and said we could pool our money to help make their finances more comfortable during the pregnancy and the beginning of their life as parents. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Were they seriously asking me to take part of my salary to cover the whims of their irresponsibility? Did they really think it was my obligation to help them become parents when they clearly weren't ready for it? Maybe I'm the bad guy here, but in my opinion, if you can't afford to have a child, you shouldn't get pregnant. I can accept accidents. No contraceptive method is 100% reliable. But if you deliberately choose not to take any measures to prevent pregnancy, the chances of becoming parents are higher. I felt that I was being very obvious at that moment, but it felt like I was talking to a group of crazy people. I also felt my blood boil, so I told them what I thought as honestly as possible, though perhaps I was a bit harsh. I told them that although I was sorry they were in that situation, it wasn't my responsibility to fix it, that if they wanted to be parents, they had to deal with the consequences of their decisions, and that I wasn't going to finance their life. If they chose to have a baby without planning and without the means to care for it, that was their problem, not mine. That's when things got ugly. Jason and his girlfriend were deeply offended. They started saying horrible things, and what hurt me the most was when his girlfriend said the reason I didn't want to help them was because I was a bitter old woman who would never have kids and that I was jealous of them for being young and able to start a family. Jason laughed as if that were a great truth, and then he said that I probably wasn't capable of having my own kids, which is why I didn't understand what they were going through. That hurt me. It's not that I can't have kids, it's that I never wanted to. I've had 2 serious relationships before my husband, and in neither of them did I want to start a family. It's just something that wasn't part of my plans. But hearing those words in my own home made me explode. Not only were they expecting me to take responsibility for their mess, but they were also insulting me in my own house. I asked them, not very politely, to leave. I wasn't going to listen to that anymore. But my husband took his son's side and said he wasn't going to throw them out, that this was his house too, and he wasn't going to allow me to kick his son and his poor pregnant girlfriend out onto the street. I couldn't believe it. Instead of defending me, my husband was attacking me and taking the side of those who were insulting me. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I threatened him. I told him that if he continued to support that attitude, then he could leave with them. My husband tried to protest, saying that this was his house too. But I reminded him that the house was in my name and that if I wanted to, I could call the police and show the paperwork. Finally, a few hours ago, they all left, my husband included. And here I am writing this. After having my coffee, I've calmed down a bit and had time to think. I think I did the right thing, but part of me feels bad for having kicked my husband out along with them. Now I'm wondering, am I the bad one for not wanting to help my stepson and his girlfriend and for kicking my husband out with them? Update 1. Most of the comments agree that I'm not the bad one in this whole situation, and honestly, your responses helped me a lot to clarify my perspective. I'm not responsible for my stepson and his girlfriend. Yes, Jason is my husband's son, but I'm not his mother, nor is it my responsibility to fix his mistakes, especially when they don't even seem willing to take responsibility for their own actions. Several comments pointed out that if Jason truly wanted to be a good father, he should be looking for ways to secure a future for his child and girlfriend. Whether that means getting a second job or at least looking for better job opportunities, instead of taking the easy way out and relying on his father's help, or rather my help. He'll have to learn to make sacrifices and take on the responsibilities that come with being an adult. Several of you mentioned that his girlfriend could easily get a job, even if just temporarily, to help out during the pregnancy. I mean, I understand she wants to stay at home later to take care of the baby, but before the baby is born, she could definitely be working to help with expenses. Now, I want to address what has perhaps been the most delicate issue for me: kicking my husband out along with his son. I know many of you said it was fair, and that he deserved it for not defending me when Jason and his girlfriend insulted me. On the one hand, I didn't want to make it seem like the house is only mine and that he lives here because I allow it, but he seems to believe he can make decisions without even consulting me. Anyway, regarding the update. After he left, he only sent me a few messages. He told me he was staying in a motel, and that Jason had gone back to his city. In the next message, my husband told me that what I did was very wrong. That he should have the right to decide if his son can live with him or not. Basically, he accused me of being selfish for not letting Jason move in with us, and told me I didn't understand what it means to be a good parent. I replied that he could make those decisions but not alone. We're a team, a couple, and the least he could have done was consult with me before offering our house to his son and his girlfriend without my consent. I told him that in a relationship big decisions are made together, and this was one of those decisions. I wasn't surprised when he responded that there was nothing to consult about, because according to him, it was his son they were talking about, and he couldn't let them live cramped in a small apartment when we had space at home. My response was clear. I told him that if that were the case, maybe he could ask his daughter or even his ex-wife what they thought about it. I said he could find out if they were willing to let Jason and his girlfriend move into their homes, and then let me know what they said. He said that was a good idea, that he would do exactly that and call me when he had consulted with them. He even went as far as to say that I would surely realize how selfish I had been, because surely his ex-wife or daughter would be willing to help out a family in need, just as his son was. It's been a couple of days since that conversation, and I haven't heard from him. No calls, no messages, nothing. Honestly, I don't think either his ex-wife or daughter will agree to what he has suggested. I know his ex-wife well enough to know that, although she's a good mother, she's also very clear that Jason has to learn to fend for himself. And his daughter, well, although she gets along with her brother, she's also very independent and has her own life organized. I don't think she's willing to put her life on hold to solve her brother's problems. Update 2. It's been a few days since my last post, and I wanted to share what's happened since. Although my husband still hasn't returned home, some interesting conversations have taken place with his daughter and his ex-wife, both of whom have made their opinions on this situation very clear. Here's an update on the events. To start, I want to clarify that my husband still hasn't come back, but not because I've forbidden him. The reason is that his own anger doesn't allow him to admit that he's wrong, much less apologize for everything that's happened. Despite other people close to him, like his daughter and ex-wife, pointing out what's wrong with his behavior, he remains stubborn in refusing to admit it. Anyway, a few days after the argument with my husband, my stepdaughter called me. She had heard about what happened after her father called to complain about my behavior. As she told me, my husband called his daughter to vent and complain about how I had treated him. He explained the situation from his point of view, basically describing how I refused to let Jason and his girlfriend move in with us and how I kicked him out of the house. What my husband didn't expect was his daughter's reaction. According to her, she yelled at her father as soon as he finished telling her what had happened. She completely disagreed with him and couldn't believe what he had done. She scolded him for not consulting me before offering the house to Jason and his girlfriend. After yelling at him for a while, my husband asked if she would be willing to let her brother live with her. Her response was a resounding no. My stepdaughter explained essentially the same reasons I had mentioned earlier. Plus, she didn't want her personal life to be affected by her brother's lack of planning and responsibility. It seems that my husband didn't expect that response, but he didn't have much to say about it, and the conversation ended there. My stepdaughter told me that she fully understood what I was going through, and had no issue with my stance. In addition to talking with my stepdaughter, I also got a call from her mother, my husband's ex-wife. It's not very common for us to talk, but our relationship has always been cordial. I was a bit surprised that she reached out, but she explained that she wanted to apologize for her ex-husband's behavior. She told me she wasn't surprised by what had happened, and that she completely understood how I felt. During our conversation, his ex-wife told me something interesting. My husband used to make impulsive decisions when they were married. Apparently, this isn't the first time he's made major decisions without consulting the person he's sharing his life with. She gave me a couple of examples that left me quite surprised. One of those examples was when he decided to change jobs without mentioning anything to his ex-wife. She told me that one day he just came home and said he had quit his current job because he had accepted an offer for another one, without discussing with her the implications this would have for the family. The decision affected their finances for a while, but he didn't seem to have considered the consequences. Apparently, the new job didn't pay as well as the old one, but according to my husband, it had more potential for the future. This ended up being true, but a decision like that should have at least been discussed. Another example was when my husband decided to sign up for a very expensive course without discussing it with her first. This happened while they were still paying off their mortgage and had 2 children depending on them. The course wasn't strictly necessary for his job, but rather something he wanted to do out of personal interest. However, the course was costly, and his unilateral decision to enroll caused tension between them. My husband also asked her if she would be willing to take Jason and his girlfriend into her house. His ex-wife said no and explained her reasons, which were quite similar to mine and his daughter's. It wasn't her responsibility to take care of a young adult and his partner who didn't seem to be making the right decisions to secure a stable future. At the end of the conversation, his ex-wife told me that the best thing my husband could do was apologize to me. She explained that while my husband used to be impulsive, what he had done this time was particularly bad, even for him. It's been 4 days since those calls, and so far, I haven't heard anything from my husband. Not a call to apologize, not a message insisting that he was right. And honestly, I don't expect him to do so, at least not soon. It's clear why he hasn't called me. I'm not sure what will happen from here. Update 3. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and things haven't improved at all. In fact, they've only gotten more complicated for everyone involved. I've been waiting for my husband, although I don't know if I should start referring to him as my ex-husband now, to take a step forward to try and fix things, but the conversation we had yesterday made it clear that there's no turning back. Just a day ago, I received a call from him. First, it was a pretty casual chat. He asked how I was, how things were going, and if everything at the house was okay. I was a little surprised that he started the conversation so calmly, as if weeks hadn't passed since everything blew up. I just answered politely, staying neutral, without giving any room for conflict. However, it didn't take long for him to lose his patience. Suddenly, the tone of the conversation changed, and he told me that I should be the one apologizing. According to him, this time apart should have helped me reconsider and realize that accepting Jason and his family into our home was the right thing to do. He said that enough time had passed and that by now, he expected me to understand his position. I responded calmly, telling him that I hadn't reconsidered anything in that sense, and that I still felt exactly the same as before. I explained that if anyone needed to apologize for what happened, it was him. I reminded him that he had made decisions without consulting me, and had disrespected both me and our relationship. That's when my ex-husband told me there was nothing to apologize for. According to him, he was still convinced he was right, and that anyone in their right mind could see that. He said it was obvious he was correct in wanting to help his son, and that I was being completely irrational. Throughout the entire conversation, he made it clear that he wasn't willing to budge an inch on his stance. At that point, seeing that he was still firmly set in his position, I decided to ask him a question that I honestly thought might make him reflect a bit. I asked him if he had, at any point, spoken with his daughter or his ex-wife to ask them their thoughts on letting Jason move into their homes. I asked in a way that didn't reveal I had already spoken with both of them, because I wanted to see if he would dare lie to me. His response was quick and direct. He didn't see the point in calling them. He told me that, at the end of the day, he was Jason's father and didn't need to seek the opinions or help of others to make decisions regarding his own son. According to him, if his son was in a difficult situation, it was his duty as a father to help him, and he didn't understand why he should involve his daughter or ex-wife in that matter. What struck me as ironic, and I couldn't let it go, was that he was saying all of this when, in reality, his own son Jason didn't seem to have learned that lesson. It was clear to me that if my ex-husband truly believed it was so important for a father to help his child without involving others, then Jason should have learned to take responsibility for himself, something he clearly wasn't doing. I told him plainly that the decision to not let Jason move into our house had already been made, and there was no chance of me changing my mind. I reminded him of the reasons why I refused to let Jason and his girlfriend move in, and I made it clear that there was no point in repeating them anymore because he didn't seem willing to listen. Additionally, I told him that if he really wanted to come back home and fix things, the first step would be to apologize and acknowledge that he had made impulsive decisions without consulting me. Only then could we sit down as adults and talk about why he acted the way he did, and how we could avoid something like this happening again in the future. His response was, as expected, the exact opposite of what I hoped to hear. He got even angrier and told me he had no intention of apologizing for anything. He made it clear that he didn't see his actions as something to apologize for, and that if I was going to continue being an unreasonable woman, then it would be best to get a divorce. After saying that, he abruptly hung up the phone, not giving me a chance to respond or even process what he had just said. Here I am now, thinking about everything that has happened since that call. I'm not happy with the idea of divorce, but if that's the route he wants to take, there's not much I can do. It's clear to me that he has no intention of apologizing or admitting that he was wrong in all of this, and I'm not going to allow Jason and his girlfriend to move into the house, so if he's willing to end our marriage over this, then it's probably better that we don't stay married. I don't think the situation is going to get better, At least not with the attitude he showed during the call. Update 4. It's been 8 months since my last update, and as many of you might have guessed, my ex-husband's threats of divorce weren't just empty words. Finally, 2 weeks after our last conversation, he filed for divorce. When I found out, I tried calling him to talk about it, thinking that maybe we could have a more serious conversation and resolve a few things, but he was determined. He told me that he had already made his decision and didn't see the point in discussing anything further. Accepting his position, I moved forward with the process. I signed the papers as he wanted, and the divorce followed its legal course. Over the months, we went through all the necessary formalities, and finally, a month ago, the process was completed. Legally, we are no longer married. The strangest thing of all was what happened midway through the divorce process. Suddenly, one day, my ex showed up at my house and asked to talk to me. I thought maybe it was to go over some issue related to the divorce, perhaps some administrative detail we hadn't covered. Until that point, he hadn't shown any sign of regret or wanting to reverse his decision to divorce, so I was surprised by what he said. During the conversation, my ex-husband told me that he had acted impulsively when he filed for divorce, and that now he wanted to cancel everything and get back together. According to him, he realized that he had rushed into making that decision, and now he wanted things to go back to the way they were before. My response was straightforward. I reminded him that I had seen him act impulsively on several occasions, and that his behavior was precisely the reason why I couldn't continue in that relationship. I mentioned how he had been impulsive when he decided to offer Jason and his girlfriend to move in with us without consulting me, and then just as impulsive when he asked for a divorce. I told him it wasn't fair to me that he kept making important decisions in a hasty manner, without considering the consequences or how it affected our life together. I made it clear that even though I had initially suggested we talk and resolve our issues, he was the one who completely shut down any conversation. He clung to the idea that he was right despite his daughter, his ex-wife, and even me trying to explain to him that he was wrong. I told him that if, at that time, he decided that divorce was what he wanted, then that's what I wanted now too. There was no going back. Although it was sad for me to see a marriage come to an end, I was also sure that it made no sense to stay in one that wasn't working. We could have talked and resolved our differences, but he chose not to. He decided that there was nothing to talk about and that he was right about everything. Now, things are simply the way they are. The last thing I know about my ex-husband is thanks to his daughter, with whom I still have a good relationship. She told me that he has rented a house and is currently living with Jason, his girlfriend, and the baby. In short, it seems like he got what he wanted from the start. I'm happy for him if this is truly what he wanted. However, I'm also convinced that this won't end well in the long term. Knowing Jason, it's only a matter of time before he starts asking for more money or things get complicated, and my ex-husband won't be able to handle everything. Anyway, it's no longer my problem, and we've both gone our separate ways. That's how things stand now.